Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Leslie Venetz, who's the founder of Sales Team Builder. Leslie uses her expertise to partner with organizations that want to build inclusive, buyer-centric sales team. She's been a 3 times head of sales who has successfully sold SMB to C-suite enterprises, and she brings a unique perspective and diverse set of experiences to businesses. A big thank you to Shruti Kapoor from Wingman for the introduction. Welcome to the show, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, big shout out to Shruti. She's just an incredible founder and woman to aspire to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I had great fun speaking to Shruti, and she's been so kind to introduce me some great, awesome guests. I just wanted to start off with, you've been a founder, but before that, you've been into sales. How did you get into this world of sales?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of the opinion, Rohit, that everybody's in sales to some extent, and everybody should just embrace that. Part of being alive is having to sell. I didn't mean to become a sales professional. I certainly didn't mean to make it my career, and not just a career, but like what I do is my day job, my side like passion project, what I create content around. I thought I would probably go into nonprofit management.
Interesting.
Because I really was driven to help, and I was driven to make an impact. And if I'm being honest, I just didn't think that sales was a career that did those things. Like I didn't see sales as a profession where you could help people, where you could make a positive impact on the world. But I got my first sales job shortly after moving to Chicago, and just immediately fell in love with those opportunities to create meaningful connections and to be curious and to genuinely help people. And 15 years later, here we are.
Interesting. And you work with a couple of companies like Carpathia Marketing and Marcus Evans Group. What were some of your learnings when you're trying to scale up sales teams over there?
What were some of my learnings? So I've spent most of my career, with the exception of 2 years when I was at like a proper startup, hired as employee number 1. I spent most of my career working for British companies. And so a lot of what I was doing was either launching new products for them or launching their existing tested product in a new market, in the Americas market. So I think a lot of what I learned has revolved around like being very clear about who your buyer is, and then putting them at the center of what you do. And I think the default, and I'm sure that you've seen this, your listeners have felt this when they've gotten sales outreach, that the seller or the company or the product is very much at the center of the messaging. And that doesn't feel good. People don't like that. It feels disingenuous. So really trying to turn that old model on its head, and really try to keep the buyer at the center of the motions we're building, the copy we're creating, the way we're communicating.
Interesting. You talked about you define who's your buyer, and you nail down on your the customer profile. But is it possible, especially for a starter, to reach out to multiple customers in order to win, or do you think that one should just focus on one ICP and just focus on that and winning it, and then moving on to other customer profiles?
Yeah, the old like GTM dilemma of pick a lane, right? Yeah. So I think that while you are figuring out product market fit, it's essential that you're testing it with various ICPs, right? Because you don't ultimately know who your ideal buyer is going to be. And without testing it, you are missing out on that opportunity to hear the feedback that might give you the idea to make the product pivot that takes you from like a ho-hum product to something that the market is really clamoring for. So there's certainly a point in standing up those new teams and standing up new companies where I think that the testing, the iteration, the being maybe a bit loose with who you're reaching out to is fine, but you have to do that with the clear goal in mind of identifying which of these is truly going to be the person that buys fastest, buys at the highest price point, has maybe a land and expand opportunity, is going to be able to refer you to other, like whatever those pieces of further revenue generation are.
Got it. I understand. And especially when you're starting to scale up your sales team, you look at building a sales playbook and then figuring out the CRM tool and then really trying to scale it up. How would you define a sales playbook, and who do you think should create it? Do you think a founder should create it or the head of sales team?
Wow, that's a really contentious question. I'm going to make somebody mad no matter what I answer. Okay, so here's what I've seen to be true the greatest number of the time. Often the founder closes those essential first customers, right? That goal of getting your first 10 paying customers, that's an important one. And most often that's from a founder-led sales model. The reality of that is that most of those are coming from the network, coming from referrals. They're not like the sort of warm inbound or cold leads. And the founder, when they are negotiating those sales, has full control over the product roadmap and pricing.
Right.
So there's a lot of flexibility there that I think can often put the founder at a disadvantage when it comes to creating the playbook, because they probably did something a little bit different for each of those sales. So I think it's really important for the founder, in partnership with the first AEs they bring on, with that head of sales, that head of marketing, whoever it is, to start laying down those foundations, but to also be really open to the playbook growing as the organization grows and as they learn more about what works, what doesn't work, and what their buyers and what their customers really want.
Got it. And you talked about AEs, and so and the sales reps, if they understand how to do the pitching, looking at the sales playbook, how can they start getting the customers, potential customers, on the call in the very first place?
Yeah, and I think you actually bring up an important point that's worth focusing on. I always recommend that folks hire AEs before they hire their head of sales. Right. And I know often that can be a bit counterintuitive, that founders think, well, I need a head of the department. But I'm a much bigger fan of starting with maybe a full cycle AE that's sort of a jack of all trades person. You hire them on the understanding that once you ask them to silo or niche down, they're probably going to move on. But it's still a solid first hire to build a team around while you get ready to bring in that first sales manager or first head of sales. But to your question, how do those first AEs, SDRs get people to say yes to them? Yeah. I think that it's about giving them what is in it for them. So it can't be those product-led pitches. It can't be the feature dump. It really has to be, you've gone on that journey from testing different ICPs. You've sort of picked your lane. This is where you really feel confident. You want to commit to at least see if that's the ICP that's going to be your ongoing target persona. And you have to dig deep to understand what their challenges are, what's going on in their world, what keeps them up at night, what those big opportunities are that they want to grasp, that are on the horizon. And that's what needs to be the crux of your outreach. And yes, you have a product or solution that can ultimately solve for some of that, but I think lead with the challenge and the opportunity that is core to your customer. And then once you get them on the phone, dig deeper, and only then do you come in to share why your product or service can solve them. So I think the buyer centricity that we talked about at the beginning of the conversation is really especially critical to getting those first customers on board when you might not have the testimonials or case studies to sort of have the proof in the pudding.
Interesting. And are there any right sort of questions or the wrong questions that lot of let's talk about the right questions. What should be the right sort of questions which a sales rep should ask, and and then we can talk about the wrong sort of questions.
Ooh, I feel like all questions are good questions. Like if you are a salesperson that is on the phone and you are asking questions and then you are zipping your lip so that you can actively listen to the responses and then ask an even better question off the back of what your prospect has shared, you're on the right track. Like you're doing better than probably 90% of the other sales professionals out there. But some of my favorite questions that just don't seem to ever fail me, regardless of who I'm selling into, are things like, tell me more, help me understand. What does that mean at your company? Just those open-ended questions where I'm not trying to lead or influence them in any direction. I'm not putting my own maybe assumptions on them. I'm just giving them the floor and that opportunity to share what they feel comfortable sharing, what is going to give me the insight later to be able to match my offering to their exact needs, so that I don't feel compelled to do that generic pitch or that feature dump.
Got it. And I would not be asking questions would be like the wrong thing to do, I assume.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Just not asking questions is the wrong thing to do. Or asking questions that are like maybe manipulative. I think our buyers are smart. They're smarter now than they've ever been before.
Yeah.
So, maybe question some of those old school sales techniques.
Yeah, interesting. And what do you think, in your view, has been what the best sales reps do to take the feedback from the customer and then share it with the customer success and product teams? What's been the best process that you've seen with the sales rep tool?
I'm not sure I've ever seen a best. I think that's a really hard process to get right. Teams that are running, so I'm sure everybody on the pod has heard like the revenue alignment or rev ops titles that are a lot more prevalent in the past few years. And so what I've seen is that teams who are less siloed tend to have more open lines of communication. Some of the best stuff I've seen is literally just dropping it in Slack, so that your people are kind of getting that that real time. Actually, the company I worked at most recently before I started doing sales, Team Builder, they were really putting effort into creating a knowledge database in Salesforce so that it was easily searchable to go back and see the feedback or the success stories or the challenge, whatever it was. So I would have to admit, I think I've ever seen a perfect process, but the companies that seem to be doing best at it are those that have the most alignment across the commercial function.
Got it. And you talked about sales team builder. We didn't touch base on that, but why did you go about, even though you've been a great operator, why did you want to build sales team builder, and whom are you targeting over there? How are you helping out startups?
Yeah, I never had the vision of being a full-time founder, which is a really funny thing to say as a full-time founder and solopreneur. But about 6 years ago, I joined a startup as employee number one. So created the MVP, did the whole GTM, made it a profitable model. And it was amazing. It was so hard. It was the hardest job I've ever had, but it was amazing. I realized I loved it. I realized I had a passion for working with companies at that particular stage where they are both creating the foundations as well as thinking about those like big ideas that will be fundamental to the future success of the company. But even then, I didn't see myself as a founder, like supporting other founders. I went on and got another, corporate head of sales job. And I had launched Sales Team Builder, like I created the LLC, but I was just doing it as a passion project and donating my time to help mostly other like women and people of color find their voice in sales. And then I decided in 2021, at the beginning of 2021 that I was ready for my next challenge. And I started interviewing with seed series A organizations that were going to hire their first head of sales. And I kind of had this epiphany moment where I thought, why am I trying so hard to work for another founder and make them a bunch of money when I already know I can build the motion? Like, I've already done it as employee number one. Why would I not just do it for myself? So that was one piece of it. And then I had this crazy experience where I got offered a job, a 460K job, like a life-changing amount of money sort of gig on a Friday. And on Saturday, I got a yes for the biggest client that I've ever had for Sales Team Builder. And in that 24 hours, I realized I did not have the bandwidth to do both, and I would have to make a choice. And when I heard the way I talked about the corporate gig, it was, oh, it'd be great to have another VP of sales title. It'd be the responsible thing to do financially. It was so logic-based. And when I talked about the client for Sales Team Builder, I was so excited about what we were going to build. And it became immediately clear that I had to follow my passion instead of just the title and the money. So I quit corporate and became a full-time, but it was like all kind of by accident.
No, I love that story. And are you still focusing on startups which are pre-series A, or who's your target audience there?
I am. Yeah, I love coming in and helping folks build repeatable processes. I love working with founders when they're at the point where they do have that proven business model, they have that product market fit, and they're jazzed to scale. And I have to come in and be a bit of the voice of reason to be like, scaling's awesome, can't wait, but first let's create those strong foundations that are going to set you up for future success. So I'm a process person. I love creating like the A to the B to the C, and then figuring out what works and carrying it forward and iterating. So it's a lot of fun to get my hands in the clay with those sorts of stations. And then I still do. I have a interactive coaching workshop series that I run. So I still run that for a lot of big corporate clients because they have a lot more money. So it creates a nice balance. I get to be in the startup world. I get to be in the corporate world. I get to pay my mortgage. I'm doing it all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally I love that story. And I want to talk about pricing, especially for early stage startups. How would you look at, pricing customers? What price should, customers pay in the early days? If it's not about ARR, what should teams be optimizing for?
I feel like that is a trick question because it's going to change from like 1 to 10 to 10 to 50 to like it's going to constantly change. I actually work, so I certainly work with plenty of SaaS companies, but I actually work with a lot of agencies and like research companies who are running subscription models, but usually like ARR versus MRR, like not the SaaS model. So I found that sometimes to be a little bit more interesting in terms of pricing because it's a lot easier for them to leave those engagements because they don't have to pivot to a completely new software and do a full new rollout and all of that. So I think I often give them the same advice that my mentors gave to me when I started thinking about my pricing, which was price on the value that you're going to deliver. So when we think about the insights that they're going to share, or, we're going to be able to 3x because of this efficiency or whatever it is, think about what that means in real dollars to the organization that you're serving and base your pricing off of that. If you're like the agency consulting route, I think that's pretty compelling. On the SaaS side, so maybe it would be interesting to even hear your take on this. I've been having a lot of conversations about how to run a PLG and an enterprise model side by side.
Right.
I think that is a really interesting conversation because you're running the freemium model with the hope to land and expand. But you have to figure out how to tier from like freemium to what's that first jump they can go up to that make them want to stick around, and then how big of a price differentiator should there be from that maybe like SMB sort of mid-market price point to your enterprise price point where it has the full list of capabilities offered. I don't have a clear answer because I feel like every single I've worked with, it's been like we've done something sort of different. But I think my advice would be, you want to attract people to your highest price point. So make it very clear why that price point is worth so much more, and like make sure that there is a big jump, so that it's like it's the Veblen curve, like people are attracted to that higher price point because obviously if they're paying more, there's something extra sexy about that product and the value that they're going to get.
Interesting. And especially on, you mentioned about price tiers, but would you look at taking the lowest priced pricing tier to get a company on board, or would you look at what are the values, what are the benefits being offered by more expensive pricing there to entice a company on board?
I feel like it depends what market they're playing into. So if it's like a well-established market, you're going to have to go out and see what your competitors are charging. And then you're going to have to decide where you like, do you want to be the low cost offering? Do you want to be the premium offering? Are you going to play the middle ground? So I think in a saturated, or at least a well-established market, your pricing to a huge extent is going to be dictated back to you based on what your competitors are doing and where you want to rank in that market. If you are trying to be like create a brand new category, that's a bit different. And I have to admit that's like that I wouldn't say is a core area of expertise for me, is like pricing while you're creating a brand new category. So I don't want to give people bad advice, but that's sort of where my thinking went. Like, are you in an established category, or you need to look externally? Are you not in an established category? Then maybe you get that privilege of trying to decipher how much value you're bringing to the organization and in real dollars for them. And then you work backwards and figure out what that means and how much you can reasonably charge that gets them to not just come in the door, but gets them to stick with you year after year.
Okay, got it. So it depends on the market. Fair enough. And I want to talk about hiring. What do you think is the right structure for all new sales hires to be onboarded on the team?
Oh my gosh, these are tough questions. I did not get a list of these questions beforehand, so you're really putting me on the spot here. Man, are like hiring AEs or SDRs or CSMs or a mix, or
especially SDRs and AEs, what should be the right structure? What would be the mix of commission and fixed base structure, pay structure would you want to give them?
So if you're bringing on AEs at an early stage startup, I believe that there has to be an equity play in there for them. Yeah. I mean, like often it's because you simply can't afford to pay them the base that they would make if they didn't go to an early stage startup. So I think it has to be a combination of like base plus commission plus equity. What I have seen is folks trying to pay commission only. I think that is shameful. Yep. I hope I'm not calling out anybody that's listening right now, but if I am, like, you need to go look in the mirror and maybe have a bit of a gut check. I think it's like deeply inappropriate to ask people, salespeople especially get this a lot. They're being asked to work for free. We wouldn't do it to other business units. We're not doing that to our CFO or to our product team. Why would we do that to our sales professionals who are the revenue backbone of our organization? So make sure that there is a base to create some of that psychological safety, and make sure that there is an equity play so that they are in it to win it with you in the long run. And then some sort of variable, obviously, based on what they're bringing in the door. even for SDRs, I mean, you could toy around with equity. I don't think it's as necessary as it is for your AEs. But I still think there needs to be a strong mix of base plus variable so that there's that element of psychological safety. I have seen organizations have some success with having the actual like commission variable be a little bit lower so that there is a bonus at the end of the year based on company performance, so that the OTE package is still very attractive and competitive, but they aren't having to have as many immediate payouts, or they can more closely tie the payouts to the overall success of the organization. So those are a couple of things I've seen work / a real call out for anybody that's trying to not pay their salespeople.
Yeah, no, very, very well put down by you. And you've been a very successful salesperson. But I had a question: why do you think there's so few women sales leaders, especially it looks like it's a male dominated field. Why is there so few women who get into the sales field? What do you think, in your view, is we have so few women who don't want to work in this field?
Yeah, it is very male dominated. It's also very dominated by white people. So we in sales just kind of have a general void of otherness of anybody that isn't like an able-bodied cis het white male. So it's not just women. I think there are a lot of folks who are maybe underestimated in terms of their potential to win, to be successful in sales. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, so I will try really hard to not go down a rabbit hole. But one of the reasons, Rohit, is that it's a really hateful place to be a woman. Like it's a very, very toxic place. I can't even tell you how many times I have been sexually harassed. I had to leave a job after 6 months because I had a supervisor that so aggressively verbally abused me and sexually harassed me that I just had to leave without another job lined up. And what's terrible about that is that I'm not the exception. Like that wasn't some weird one-off. Like all women that I speak to have had at least one circumstance of being sexually harassed by their male supervisor or male colleagues. So I think a huge part of it is that it is very toxic. We're working on it. Like the evolution is happening. But the reality is that it's not been a safe place for women to work. And then there are also some structural issues that just make sales a really hard profession. If you think about an average compensation package being a 50-50 split, base plus commission, in places like America, where there is not any mandatory maternity leave that's paid. If a woman wants to leave the workforce for any amount of time to care for their child, they're taking a 50% pay cut. Like that's significant. I don't know that many people that can just take a 50% pay cut and not feel the hurt of it. And will probably like lose a bunch of their territory and lose their entire pipeline. Like there's some serious, I just think like structural things that make it very difficult for women to see sales as a feasible or like lucrative career path. And then worse, when women do join the profession, what they're greeted by is often a very unsafe work environment. So yeah, it makes it tough.
Yeah, no, it's very sad to know that women go through sexual harassment. It's really bad. It's the onus is on us to make sure we have diversity in every field, in every job, and there's a lot we need to do.
It's tough. Well, and I'm sure you saw the data that came out earlier this year from PitchBook, and then I think it was like validated by Crunchbase that in 2021, only 2% of VC funding went to women-only funded companies. And then even if the co-founder was a man, it was still only like 18%. Like the numbers were shocking. And we see a lot of those same numbers in sales. Like the newest numbers on C-suite representation, like sales C-suite, right? So CCO, CSO, CRO roles, puts representation of women in the single digits. So I think there's like a representation piece as well. If we're not seeing ourselves as founders, if we're not seeing ourselves as chief revenue officers, I think it does make the role slightly harder to imagine and aspire towards.
Got it. Yeah, no, I heard that Serena Williams is getting the VC because she was shocked to know that there's just 2%, considering that she's a top 3 or top 4. She has made most money in the tennis, so she really wants to correct it. And I think you need more women leaders, more women entrepreneurs, more women founders, and the lifestyle master needs more women guests on the show so that we have more stories to talk about. Yeah, and you did start. You talked about that you were working with a lot of British startups who want to launch in the US. How can somebody be a fractional salesperson? I didn't talk about it earlier, but we both are members of Pavilion, and there's a lot of fractional work which happens for say for a marketing role or for a financial role, but can they be a fractional salesperson? And how can somebody like a British or Indian startup, how can they launch in say America and hire a sales leader?
Yeah, really good question. Shout out to Pavilion, shout out to Sam Jacobs. Love being part of that community, love our entire sales community. So maybe 2 thoughts on that. One, when I see companies coming over, certainly you see it, I feel like some of the worst perpetrators are honestly companies coming from the UK, Singapore, Australia, where they've been used to doing business in English as their first language. And they feel like they can then, as a result, just drag and drop everything right over to the Americas. But there's a much different personality going on over here. So I think one of the calls to action I would give folks if they're trying to make that leap is just sense check your language from with a native. I think we have a lot less flowery language a lot of the time. We're a little bit I don't want to say curt, but a lot more to the point. And so some of those niceties or some of those rapport builders that are so essential to have in other cultures, they really hurt your open and reply rates in this market. And even little things like changing your S's to Z's, that they're little things, but I think often the importance of making those small changes is underestimated, and it kind of puts people 2 steps back before they can get that 1 step forward. And maybe the person to sense check that with is a fractional leader. I think you need to decide if you're looking to hire a Americas-based fractional leader, what kind you want. You can have somebody that is really acting as that extension of your team. So they're doing day-to-day management of your staff. Maybe they're, even in your CRM, monitoring your KPIs. They're, having PIP conversations. So you can have a fractional sales leader that is very, very involved, but you can also dial back a bit from that and just leverage fractional leaders to help you set up your tech stack or understand what tech stack is right for you. And maybe that's the type of gig you use them for, or maybe they just come in and help build that playbook. So, I also think you can hire those fractional leaders more as a very defined gig. This is the one thing I want this expert to help me with, instead of just the more traditional, you have to come in and manage my team model.
Got it. Interesting. And you've also been a writer and you've co-authored a book called Heels to Deals: How Women Are Dominating in B2B Sales, along with Shruti, who's been a past guest, which is launching on November 10th. Talk more about the book. What made you write the book, and what was your entire journey of writing the book along with Shruti and other authors?
Yeah. It's been such an honor to be part of that group of co-authors. I mean, it really is a group of 30 women who are just the definition of what it means to be a true professional in sales. And they're folks that really lead with the skills that I think are the future of sales. So things like active listening and curiosity and empathy. So it's a really incredible group of women. The book itself really inspirational. I, like so many things in my life, Rohit, this is a real trend. It just sort of happened. I kind of fell into it. And I'm a person that likes to say yes. If I'm curious and something seems exciting, it seems like it would spark joy in my life, I like to lean in. So I had the opportunity to both share a bit of my story of what it's been like to be a woman in enterprise sales for 15 years, and also hopefully lead some words of inspiration for our next generation of sales professionals.
Super interesting. We'll put that in the show notes. And I quickly want to do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
Oh my gosh, favorite business book. I have to go with Art of Negotiation. That's a hard, but I love that book.
Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. And if you could go back in time when you started working on Sales Team Builder, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
What's the one thing I would have focused on? So I had the incredible privilege of gearing up before I went live as a full-time founder. But I think like my advice for other people who are thinking about going all in on the entrepreneurial journey, before you quit your day job, like get your tech stack sorted, get the basics sorted, because I think it's easy. This is such a tactical piece of advice, but I think it's so easy to underestimate how much time it takes to set up your HubSpot and your FreshBooks and your this tool and your that tool. So get that clarity of what the vision of your company is, and then get your tech stack set up, and then quit your day job.
Got it. Yeah, no, absolutely love that advice. Do you have any favorite online tools, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Oh my gosh, Reggie.ai, full disclosure, I'm on their advisory board, but I'm also obsessed with the tool. It's an AI tool for writing cold copy. And when I first met with the founder, I think I was borderline rude to him because I so deeply did not believe that what they had was any good. Fast forward 6 months, I'm on the board. That one's really cool. And I think generally things there's another tool called Lavender that's very similar. Yeah, okay, you're nodding your head, you recognize that one. I think those are such easy tools for everybody to use. You don't even have to be in sales. You can be in marketing. You can be in, you can be a founder. You could only be doing internal comms, but they help you communicate better, and we all need that, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think shout out to the London Pavilion event, which happened, and shout out to Jordan, who told me about Lavender. So just started using Lavender, and that's why I was nodding, because I had no idea about Lavender, and he was kind enough to share it with me. I'm going to look at Reggie as well, but these are I think really interesting tools for salespeople. We're going to put that in the show notes. And Leslie, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Sales Team Builder?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn, post there daily, and pretty available to answer questions from people as well. I also am on TikTok. So I create daily on TikTok. Well, I wouldn't say daily. I create on TikTok at Sales Tips Talk. But if you're more into video content, you can find me there.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Leslie, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.